Um, and I want to say, more than 50 years later, we're still having the same discussion with the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. And it is sad, but what we want to do today is discuss the issues and and give a message of hope towards the end of our discussion here today. The Black Lives Matter movement has manifested itself in various ways around the world. And I think the reason for that is anti-Blackness is it's a sentiment that does not see any geographical boundaries. I can speak for myself and from my experiences growing up in India that the color of one's skin, it, it pervades into the society, and it creates bias and racism and discrimination, and the oppression of people who just have dark skin. And so this is not a thing that's particular to the United States. It's global, and I think that's why we're here today. I want to give very like briefly one small example. I grew up watching a commercial for a cream, and I grew up in India. I grew up watching a commercial for a cream called Fair and Lovely. The purpose of this cream is to make your skin whiter. It's not about radiance boosting, it's to make your skin whiter. This particular cream and the fairness cream industry in India alone has a $450 million market share. And because of the Black Lives Matter movement, there has been pressure on the company that makes this cream. They recently changed the name of it, but that's not really changing anything, because fair is lovely is a message that's been told to Indian girls, Indian boys, since as long as I can remember. And that should just not be the case. While it's a movement in a small movement in the right direction, we're nowhere near where we should be, because the color of our skin, it's not what should be determinative of our humanity, of how we exist in society. And we all know that the Black Lives Matter movement recently has sparked change around the world, because we've heard about the protests that are happening around the world, as well as in the United States. And Spencer, I know you were out, I believe it was in New Jersey, protesting. We would love to hear your thoughts, your experience, while you were out there.
Um, so yeah, I went to two protests in Franklin, New Jersey. I went to two in South Brunswick, and I went to one in Jersey City. And what I saw at the protest is a lot of young people. So the people who hit in the streets is mostly the young people. And apart from just the youth in the streets, I saw a lot of different ethnicities of different races of people, men and women, kids. I seen old people too. But I think the beautiful thing about it was that it wasn't just minorities. It was also white people who was marching with us. And I think that's important too, because I feel like throughout history, um, you know, sometimes white people, I mean, this might offend people, but I don't really care. Sometimes white people don't want to hear about what's going on unless it comes from another white person. You see what I'm saying? So I feel like having allies on our side that are white, I feel like that will help more white people to understand the movement, because we can't make the change just by ourselves. So it's going to take everybody to be educating their family, educating their friends, educating their teachers, educating their kids on what's really going on in America and across the world with anti-blackness, colorism, and racism.
That's a great message, Spencer, especially in the Asian and South Asian communities. Education, I think, is one of our biggest challenges. Um, Bevan, I want to talk to you about uh, what your thoughts are and what your perspective is on George Floyd, and specifically, uh, I want to ask you about David Dungay, and if you could speak a little bit about him and his case.
Thank you, Neha. Yeah, I think. Thank you for letting me talk on this. I think from Australia, when we heard about this happening, I think for many of us, we just saw another brother, another community member um, that had gone down. And our condolences to the family in America. And it reminded us of David Dungay, who was a Dungari man, and he would want me to say that because our culture and our tradition and our connection to land is what holds us all together in Australia. He was a Dungari man, and he was serving a prison sentence. Close to the end of the prison sentence, he took some biscuits, and he was a diabetic. He was told not to eat those biscuits, and he continued. And from that, a number of prison guards came in and dragged him out of the cell, held him down, and put their knee on his back. He cried out 12 times, "I can't breathe." They put a sedative in him, and 1 hour later, our brother had passed away. So our brother Floyd, he reminded us of the many deaths in custody in Australia, from David Dungay to Cameron Doomadgee from Palm Island, who also died in a cell, and it led to massive riots on an island that was predominantly an Aboriginal community. So yeah, I think that's very, very sad, and certainly given the protests and everything with Brother Donald, we were it made us even more focused, if you like, to address some of the structural issues that lead to the problems where we see Black lives taken.
Thank you, Bevan, for sharing that. Gafar, can you share some of your thoughts on this?
Oh, where should I start? Well, so I lived in the US for about 41 years, right? I moved to the US when I was a teenager to go to college, and in the late 70s, early 80s, lived in Harlem, and this was back when Harlem wasn't considered a place for, shall we say, the civilized people to live, right? But for those of us that lived there, it was one of the best, most artistic places in the world. Like all the famous jazz artists and stuff like that lived there. So I'm going there to kind of like put some recent historical perspective to all of the things that's going on, right? Because back when there were no cell phone cameras and stuff like that's going on, being used to photograph a lot of these atrocities that were performed by people in law enforcement on Black and brown skinned people in the US. This was going on. It's just that they were not believable, because you can tell the story and people would deny it because it's your word against the police report, and people tend to believe what the authorities talked about. So when I watched, it took me like a couple of weeks to watch the George Floyd video completely, right? Especially the part when he was calling out to his dead mother, just as it was dying, and I was thinking about it, and I was going, this is going to mean something, right? And you see the protests, you see the fact that the protest is not limited to just Black and brown people this time around. And I think because of the video, and there were a lot of white allies and allies of other races participating in the protest around the world. And the reason it resonates around the world is because racism and oppression, or judging you by the color of your skin, it's not limited to the United States, as you mentioned, Neha. But it's particularly like egregious in the US, if we could say that, because it's woven into the fabric of society to the point where if you don't look hard, sometimes you don't even notice it, right? Prior to George Floyd, there were a lot of people. I lived in New York, right? I remember an old lady named Eleanor Bumpers, right? 80 years old woman in her own kitchen that was shot dead by the police because they came in with a report of disturbance, and she was in her kitchen with a knife. So 40-year-old police officer felt in danger by an 80-year-old overweight woman with a knife in her hand in her own kitchen, and she was shot dead, right? Amadou Diallo and a lot of names like that. So the 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 thing that keeps recurring to me is that you know we have to look at this, and we have to look at it from the perspective that yes, this is wrong. Yes, we want to change it, um, but we can't allow it to um, to turn us to negative, and we have to keep striving to persist even in spite of.
Thank you, Gafar. And and I want to kind of change the perspective a little bit, going to Donald, because Donald, you observed the protests, the George Floyd protests in Australia. What was that like?
Well, during a pandemic, I was surprised to see that and observe that the streets were full. Neha. It was you could not move in the city of Melbourne. It was shoulder to shoulder, people from all over the world. Melbourne is one of the most diverse cities in the world, and you had people from all over the world, just disgusted by what they saw in terms of George Floyd, but it also took an opportunity to speak out loud about the deaths in custody here in Australia, the First Nations people's deaths in custody, and it was a time for uh, people to speak out and scream out and protest about the injustice around the world. George Floyd sparked something in people that I believe there have been more than 2,322 protests worldwide uh, as a result of George Floyd. But Gafar mentioned before we had this technology, I reflected back at the death of Dr. Martin Luther King that caused over $40 million worth of property damage in the LA riots. There were also race riots that gripped almost 160 cities across the United States, where a Black Vietnam veteran was shot by an off-duty white police officer. The National Guard was called in, and the city burned for more than 5 days. And although George Floyd was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back in 2020, that has ignited this rage all over the world. Had technology been in place and smartphone cameras uh, been active in place in the summer of 1955 that captured the death of Emmett Till. Emmett Till was age 14 years old, and he was on a visit to the South. And after falsely being accused of grabbing a white woman, he was pistol whipped, brutally beaten, and shot in the head after being thrown in the river where his body later surfaced. Emmett Till's body was so unrecognizable, it was pulled from the water and the only way to identify him was a silver ring that he wore. His mother said of leaving her son's casket open, "I wanted the world to see what they did to my baby." This case was reminiscent of Trayvon Martin's case that drove the motivation to start the Black Lives Matter movement. So I just want our audience to understand that this is no new occurrence. These atrocities have been happening in US history and Australia history and places all over the world. This is nothing new, but George Floyd, because it was videotaped in real time, second by second, minute by minute, It brought it home to every computer, every smartphone, every social media outlet. And today is an opportunity for us to discuss it, but not only discuss it, how do we move forward? How do we make these changes so that in 100 years, after all of us are dead, our descendants don't have to again deal with these atrocities, deal with the latest technology capturing injustice. Now is the time to move, and it will take a movement of the heart.
And thank you, Donald, for that. Very insightful. I want to talk a little bit about systemic racism. And the reason I want to approach the subject with the panel is because I repeatedly hear, whether it's out and about in daily life or on the media or elsewhere, that you know it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. All of these things happened in the past. We're in a different place as a society, um, and let's all get over it. And I've heard things as extreme as, well, Barack Obama was president. I want to hear. I want to hear the panel's response on this. And I think, with systemic racism, I want to start with Bevan. Bevan, you and I have had a couple of conversations about this, and you mentioned structural racism in Australia. I would like to hear, what the Australian perspective is on this issue first.
Uh, Thank you, Nia. I think it's okay. I'll just speak about my own experiences as growing up as a young boy in a remote community. I had been arrested and spent some time in prison as a 13-year-old. In where I'm from, that episode, being incarcerated for quite a while, that's a rite of passage for Aboriginal people. It was a rite of passage then for young Aboriginal boys to be locked up. When I was first arrested and taken into the cell, one thing I had noticed was that, and I was too young to be put with the men. I was put with the women, but I looked in the men's cell and all I saw was a sea of black legs. And that's the one thing that stayed with me, even though I was 13 and couldn't really understand what was happening. And had been taken away and had seen my first men's prison just passing through by the time I was 13. And that experience is not unique. Most of my friends growing up had spent time in prison. Even my colleague at Jarrah Legal, Brian Berra, was telling me he was arrested 4 times for nothing. So I think that Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people are perhaps viewed a certain way and indeed profiled, if I could use that term, and many end up incarcerated, and indeed based on statistics where 13 times more likely, it could be higher, to be incarcerated in prison, and as a result 27 times more likely to die in prison as well. So unfortunately, that's my experience, and it comes from a background of not really having any education systems back then that taught about our culture, our history, about our rich diversity, about our trade and enterprise prior to the arrival of Captain Cook in the 1700s. We weren't taught about those things, but thankfully, and I guess being led by, the African American community has been so pivotal and important for rights movement in Australia. Indeed, we've always looked to the US and leaders to find inspiration and to find that will to stand up for what is right, and also what is just. And it's wonderful to sit here today and to continue that with my colleague Donald Betts, and to work with a wonderful firm, Jarrah Legal, and also our partners, Norton Rose Fulbright.
Bevan, I have a question. So, Jarma Legal is the first national indigenous law firm in Australia. Can you just speak a little bit? I'm very curious. Can you speak a little bit about how that came about?
A lot of people have asked me this, and I think you could go back to the very early experience of growing up in a remote community with very, very little opportunity, to meeting a young Brian Barrow, who's now a partner with Jarma Legal. He's a Torres Strait Islander, Murray Islander. 15, 16 years ago, we said one day we need to establish a law firm. We need to establish a law firm that represents our people, that speaks a voice of what is just and what is right, to add our voice to the national narrative. And 15, 16 years later, we were able to form Jarma. Jarma is taken from the Aboriginal people, the Bidjara, and Mer is taken from the Torres Strait Islands. And we felt it was important for the Aboriginal people and the Torres Strait people to unite and come together. The name means one mountain. I had a long partnership with Norton Rose Fulbright, and it also just happened that one mountain became two mountains, or a bigger mountain, if you like. And then with Brother Donald and I guess a world community now, and a movement, it's just become an even bigger mountain. So it's big mountain.
And
That's
thank
cool.
you, Bevan. And I'm hoping that we can, after this, even continue our conversation on how we can connect the First Nation people of Australia to the Native American communities in the United States. And I know we're working on a couple of those projects, and we're certainly looking forward to that. Gafar, if you could speak, what was it that jumped out to you about systemic racism, if anything? Coming from your experience and background?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. That's a great question, actually. So I was born the year Nigeria became independent. Uh, it's I'm not going to tell you what year, right? So so and as a result, I didn't experience many of the things that the generations before me experienced as a colony, right, of Britain, right, and some of the kids that are growing up today in Nigeria didn't experience some of the things I experienced. But one of the things that was very formative for me was the spirit of protesting in Nigeria, right? It was, I coming back to Nigeria, I relate to younger Nigerians, and I said when I was growing up, if you look at me the wrong way, we're going to be on the street protesting you for looking at me the wrong way, right? Because we feel the need. We were empowered, and we maybe a bit naive, but empowered to have the right things happening. And as a result, Nigeria around that time was considered like a developing country. It slid down quite a bit after that. So this was uh, the viewpoint or the perspective that I took to the U.S. when I went to the U.S. And of course, I see similar spirits with Black American brothers and sisters there, and I see the responses to some of those protests. But the thing that started opening my eyes towards systemic racism when we protest in Nigeria, it was just bad government, right? People being corrupt and stealing money and stuff like that, and we're protesting that. So the first thing that opened my eye towards systemic racism was um, I was a student, electrical engineering student at City College of New York, and there was a lot of uh, issues going on with people, Black people wanting to protest Korean grocery stores, right? And um, and we were asking questions, but why? What did the Koreans ever do to anybody, right? And um, and some of the people that were pushing for the protest were saying, you know, they were getting loans from the banks, and Blacks in the neighborhood that wants to open the same store can't get loans from the banks, right? So, and people had to be educated that actually these guys can get loans from the banks. They could get loans from, you know, cooperatives that they formed amongst themselves and stuff like that because they were foreigners, like most people. But the question then becomes, why can't Black people get loans to open simple bodegas and grocery stores? And um, and we got educated on the issue of redlining, right? And redlining, for people that may not know it, is the concept that if you are from certain side of the track, you're not considered credit worthy, right? And um, and when we started doing protests, we thought it was like the banks were just bad. We have to open their eyes towards giving loans to Black people. We have to boycott banks and do all kinds of like bad things to make them uncomfortable. And I mean, we were in a university environment, so there was a need to read more about why are banks doing this to Black people. And it turns out that the actual formulaic process that the banks used to determine whether you're credit worthy based on your zip code or not was the basis of it was the federal government, right? You see, the federal government had a database that says that, you know, when the Fannie Mae and all those mortgage system was getting formed, they had a database that says that, you know, what that they use to determine whether the home that you are about to buy, whether it's going to appreciate or not appreciate. And their metric for determining that is if you were a Black neighborhood versus the easy metric is you were a Black neighborhood, your house is not going to appreciate, and therefore you're not worthy of getting government assistance for a mortgage. And if you're a white neighborhood, you are. And if you're a mixed neighborhood, it's a coin toss, right? And the bank used this database to actually determine, it's a government database, so the data absolutely makes sense. So you can't really blame the bank. This is the banks explaining this to us. You can't really blame the banks for using the government record to determine where to provide loans, right? So that was very disillusioning, right? Because I came from a background that government is supposed to be good, right? And yes, government doing this kind of stuff.
It just goes to show how deep rooted it is.
Correct. And that's
Correct.
what
Yep.
that's what makes it systemic.
Yep.
The fact that it
Exactly.
is deep rooted, and you can't really point to one person as the bad actor here. The entire system is is incentivized to behave that way towards people in the minority community. And that's
Spencer,
the
oh, no, finish,
sorry.
Gafar.
No,
Sorry.
no, no. I'm
Oh, I see Spencer nodding his head, and I want to hear from him on this issue
Redlining,
about systemic
systemic
racism.
race.
I mean, speak what's on your mind.
I was really just listening to the information, but what I can say about systemic racism is that it's definitely deep rooted over, especially in America, because the basis of America was built on slave labor. You know what I mean? So, and the people who wrote the Constitution and wrote the amendments, they all owned slaves. And even the 13th Amendment that exists today is still an amendment. It says that slavery is illegal unless the individual commits a crime. So that's why you have mass incarceration. That's why you have war on drugs, where they're targeting crack cocaine as opposed to regular cocaine, because we all know who could afford the cocaine and who could afford the crack cocaine, and where did they put the crack cocaine, and where, you see what I'm saying? So it's based on minority groups, and it's based on targeting Black people to try to get them into prison. So it's a form of slavery. So that's why when you look in we go to look in prisons, population is majority Black people. That's why when you know, I was just in my neighborhood down the street, and I was with my friend. We got ran down on by undercover police, and we were just chilling in the car, you know, and then they just opened the door, they ripped us out the car. They said, "What kind of?" They looked at my friend. He's Black. They said, "What are you? What other drugs did you take?" So mind you, we're just smoking a little weed, right? They said, "What other drugs do you take? Why are you so eccentric? Why are you this? What?" And mind you, my friend, he's all the way like alkaline vegan, Dr. Sebi, holistic health based, like all the way like clean eating, like clean philosophy. He meditates, prays every, like, you know what I'm saying? Just one of those real wholesome guys. And then they accusing him of being on hard drugs. And then they saying, "Oh, what did you take? Why are you being so jumpy?" And we're like, well, we're scared because one, you ran down on us without announcing yourselves. You didn't show a badge. You're not wearing any police clothing. You came in an unmarked car, and then you just snatched us out of the vehicle. So then that same thing, the accusation of somebody being on drugs, they said that to George Floyd. And then, so there was already a difference in treatment. They were treating me very bad. Like, of course, like they ripped me out the car or whatever, but they were treating him worse. And it was like, it was weird to see, because this is not something that's new, because I grew up in Franklin, which is a very diverse neighborhood. I mean, very diverse town. And I see these things growing up. I see the way police officers interact with us, with the way that teachers interact with us, the way that our school staff interacts with us. And this unfair, this is invisible, like unfair tone and treatment towards Black people. And that's something that I noticed growing up. And then just this incident happened in March. So just seeing that, how the police officers, and just like Gafar said, it's their word against yours. So they said, "Okay, they said you're not under arrest. We just got to search you." So then they turn us around, and then we're facing the car, and then they're like putting cuffs on us all of a sudden. And then we're like, "Yo, wait. I thought we weren't under arrest." And they were like, "Well, stop resisting, stop resisting, stop resisting." Same thing they said to George Floyd, "Stop resisting." It's like almost as if they wanted us to get turned up and try to fight back. So they got him with his hands behind his back, and they slam him. 3 officers, they slam him on the ground, right? They got his pants is like, they got his pants down, like all type of inhumane things going on. Like, they're sitting on him. One person got his foot on his back. The other officer got his foot on his leg, and then the other officer's pinning me against the car. And I'm like, "Yo, what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing?" Like, he didn't even do anything. And then they were like, well, he's trying to resist. He's trying to resist. What the heck did he take? What did he take? I'm like, we didn't even light the joint. We didn't even do anything yet. Like, so then they hit him with resisting arrest. They hit him with possession. They hit him with all type of things. They just slapping stuff on just to make it seem like a bigger thing. And you know, they took us to the station, and then we sitting in the station, and then even like they made him sit in the cell, and they made him take his shoes off and sit barefoot in the cell. And I'm just sitting, I get to sit outside the cell, and then I'm just looking. And so as they're processing us, then we're asking them, like, where are you guys from? Like, where are you guys even from? Like, are you guys can't be from Franklin, because the way you're treating us, the white people in our town don't act like that. So then they're like, "Oh, I'm from Toms River, or I'm from da da da." And these towns, which are like other parts of Jersey, they're predominantly white. So then it just showed me that we have people in our communities policing, supposed to protect and serve, but these police officers are from predominantly white neighborhoods coming into predominantly colored neighborhoods, policing and looking for crime, not protecting the servant, but looking for crime. So then they associate these people of this minority group with crime, because this is the only time they're seeing anybody that's Black, Latino, Asian, because where they're from, there's not a lot of them. So that has a lot to do with, that's definitely systemic, because why is it set up that the majority of the police officers in my neighborhood are not even from my neighborhood. They're from another neighborhood where it's predominantly white. And then the first time they see us is in this light. Oh, criminals, criminals. So that's something that personally affected me just growing up. I see that a lot, like with the
And,
police.
and Spencer, I think you make two great points that I hear is one regarding police reform, and we're planning to have a separate panel on that, but that is like at the heart of what's going on right now. It's one of the key pieces to what we need to address. And you hit it on the head, right? You protect and serve, right? It's not aggression. That's not the job. It's to protect and serve, and that's not being done. And I think the second part of what you said that I noticed is um, the treatment of you was slightly better when you were when the police officer approached you, and that's, to me, that's black and white. That's, that
Yeah,
just speaks for
all
itself.
the way, it's all the way racist.
Yep.
And then a couple of days later, I see police officers pulling over a group of young black kids, about three of them, on the side of the street. They're making them sit on the curb. They searched the vehicle, didn't find anything, right? And this has happened to me before too. Like many times I've been pulled over when I'm with my black friends, or even when I'm with my Filipino friends or whoever, and they're searching our vehicle and just looking, like really trying to find something, and they didn't find anything. And then they'll let you go, and they'll say, oh, well, we're not going to give you a ticket. We're just going to let you go. It's like, let me go. Like, I didn't even, what do you mean, let me go? You shouldn't even pull me over in the first place. So I think there's a real big problem with just the system of police, right? Because it takes more training to become a barber than it takes to become a police with a gun. So I think that's already something that is long overdue to be changed, because police, the whole thing of police, it stems from slave patrols, and it's never been changed, it's never been reformed, it's never been replaced. It's just the names have changed to the police force as opposed to slave patrol. So you know
Yep.
people don't know
and
this.
and thank you for sharing your experience, Spencer. I want to talk I want to switch gears for a second and talk about why we're here today. And the caption of our panel is a movement of the heart. And we believe that there's a positive message to be had here. And in one of my conversations with Bevan, and um, I want to say that the words "a movement of the heart" are actually Bevan's words. They're spoken by him. And Bevan, I want you to talk a little bit about what that means and what our way forward is. How do we move forward from all of this, and why is it a movement of the heart?
Thank you. Now, well, I guess the one thing is that when our brother Shoda or Gafar and Donald and you were speaking it, everything flows from the heart. Um, everything flows from your heart, where your heart is, and and I think in Australia we've been through, um, we've walked in the wilderness, our people, for a long time. We once held the plough of the nation hundreds of years ago, for thousands of years. Um, the entrepreneurs of the ancient world, deeply spiritual people, deep connection to all things around us and the Creator above. Um, and for the last 100 years, we've been in the wilderness, and um, we've seen our communities destroyed, our culture taken, policies put in place that says that we're not as good. Um, and we've come to a time in Australia where it's just a new season. We sense that in our spirit, that it's those things are past, and as First Nations people, as the rightful heir to the nation that had welcomed all nations, had always welcomed all nations, we need to stand for now and what is just and what is right, and teach the world how we live, how we care, and how we share. Um, and we believe the way forward is to take that step in faith, to take the plough of the nation again, to come together with great firms like Norton Rose Fulbright and great people like Gafar and Donald and Shoda and yourself and many people on here, and say, let's let's move forward together, knowing that um, we're all one, we're all together. That's our deep spiritual belief that we're all created of one blood, of one creator. Let's move together. And we have a wonderful opportunity as we look ahead because Australia is about to develop half of its nation. I think Australia is about 7.8 million square kilometres. The government's launched an initiative to develop the next half, the northern half of Australia. That land um, covers about 3 million square kilometres, and 2 million square kilometres of it is under Aboriginal title. And as we look to trade agreements with now England and look to deepen our relationships with the US, but also in particular the minority groups of the US, African American businessmen and women, um, we see a wonderful um, future of stewardship, where we understand that, um, as Donald will say, we're all here together and we're all in it together. And we have this wonderful opportunity going forward to stand together, um, black and white together, and um, in the spirit of love. And I was listening to um, speeches by John Lewis last night and speeches by Bobby Kennedy after Martin Luther King was killed, and he spoke about the way forward is love, 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 compassion, and it is the way. And I was also reading a poem from one of our leaders that had passed away, Ujuru. She was Ujuru Nanakol. Now, she had fought for many years for international human rights, but she got to a point where she had to turn back home to see and help our people here um, because this place was in such a um, it was in a sad place, and she saw that communities were destroyed, and she wrote this poem called "Son of Mine." If I may, um, my son, your troubled eyes search mine, puzzled and hurt by color line. Your black skin soft as velvet shine. What can I tell you, son of mine? I could tell you of heartbreak, hatred blind. I could tell you of crimes that shame mankind, of brutal wrong and deeds malign, of rape and murder, son of mine. But I'll tell you instead of brave and fine, when lives of black and men entwine, and men in brotherhood combine. This what I tell you, O son of mine. And I think the movement of the heart is that it's a time and season that we come together in the spirit of love, and we see a shared vision where we're all equal and can build a great nation together, and remember the pioneering spirit that made America great and Australia great is something that we can harness again, where everyone is able to contribute at the table of nation building.
That's very beautiful, Bevan. Thank you for sharing that. Donald, do you have any thoughts on the way forward and a movement of the heart?
Conversations like these, getting together and really breaking bread, not talking about, not being afraid to talk about the elephant in the room. Uh, we were able to get across the world. Gay marriage has been passed. There have been initiatives for Me Too movements. There have been initiatives to stop modern slavery. But when it comes to children, but when it comes to this race issue, this elephant in the room, for some reason, we time and time again put it on the back burner. I think leaders have to stand up courageous. If you run for office, stand up and be willing to lose that office. Don't serve in the position just so that you're reelected. You have to have the courage to either lose your seat for something that is going to benefit the future or not run at all. Leave it to someone else who has the courage and the ability to write the legislation to do things that will change the world, that will change the state and the city governments and the federal government. And again, across the world, we need to utilize our access to the polls. and not let anything demean that and take that away. Um, Lawyers, those that are officers of the law, be courageous. Stand up and fight for justice. Uh, you've taken a sworn oath to to serve the people, to be the the advocates of justice. Do that, mean that, and serve. Um, Times have changed. We're in a different era, and it's one that we can either do something significant, or we can go another 100 years looking at black codes and redlining and racial profiling, or we can actually work towards making this world a better place, a more just place. And the way forward is by listening to our heart. As Dr. King said, love, love, love. Bless it, bless it, bless it. And bless each of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. And I think we still have a couple minutes, so I welcome any closing remarks from Gafar, Spencer. Any thoughts on sending a positive message to our audience?
Spencer, you want to take it or?
Go.
Huh?
Go ahead.
All right. So I went to engineering school, right? So I always joke that I'm forever an engineer because I'm always looking for a mechanical way of solving a problem, right? Um, and as I listened to both Donald and Bevan, I was thinking, so what's, I'm as loving as the next guy, right? But what are some of the tangible things that we can do uh, to change things around, right? And I thought about um, changing, financing, changing a bunch of things. But the thing that I keep coming back to is education, right? And I don't just mean education as in like, better high schools or better colleges and stuff like that. But I mean education as in educating, enlightening one another on the the challenges and the issues that exist. So, if you guys haven't seen this, I'm sure some of you have. You should consider watching it. There was a TED talk that was given by um, uh, a lady, Heather McGee, who used to be the president of Demos think tank, and is now, I think, president of Call of Change or something like that. And she narrated a story that I'm not going to bore you with, but the bottom line of it is discussing how um, racism actually hurts the country, right? Not just, yes, it definitely hurts the black people that or the minorities or the indigenous Australians or the people that are intended for, but it actually hurts the people that are supposed to benefit from it as well. And one of the examples that she gave was an example of, you know, the South, Alabama, right, in the 60s during the civil rights movement. And she gave an example that in the 30s, there was a lot of funding that was going on to build, nice public institutions and stuff like that. And one of the things is there's a lot of spending on parks, public parks and swimming pools and stuff like that. So come the 60s, when there was like legal movement around, black people can use the public pool as well, right? It's not just for whites. And the white people in town got together and decided they'd rather not have the pool than to have black people swim in it. This is in very hot Alabama, and they went and they empty out the pool and they paved it over so that there's no longer a swimming pool for people. Now, the problem is that rich people that are able to build homes to have swimming pools don't have a problem. But the majority of the people in the white people in Alabama are poor. They can't build such a building. So they have to suffer as well as the black people that were building that. And the learning that I took from that conversation, and she gave a lot more examples about like subprime mortgages and stuff like that, and how it hurts white people just like it hurts black people. And the thinking that it keeps coming to my mind is that, you know, um, if a lot of white people, especially poor white people, right, if they were made to understand um, some of the how some of the racism actually hurts them, right? To Donald's point about politicians standing up and stuff like that, you know, it's not the politicians that I need to stand up. It's the electorate that I need to stand up, right? If they're educated and they are educated to the point where they're voting their best interests, whites, the whites or the people you would call white trash, right? And black people. And if you look at these people, actually, the majority of the people in this country um, they are worse off with the current crop of politicians that are there, right? And if they're voting their best interests, they will be voting better politicians that are likely to change the outcome for the majority of the people in the country.
And Gafar, as a closing remark, I just want to say I think education. I agree. I couldn't agree with you more in the sense that you explained it is important. And one message I want to give to the people who are listening is educate those around you, and don't be afraid to speak. And I send this message from a very personal level because it's taken me a very long time to find my voice. I lost it along the way. I don't know if it happened during law school or sometime after. It took me a very long time to find my voice. And there's a very famous quote that I want to leave the audience with that was spoken by Mahatma Gandhi. In a gentle way, you can shake the world. You don't need to move mountains to do it, right? So I encourage every single person who has listened in today, and have you encourage everyone around you is take small steps, even if it's talking it out, talking to somebody about it. And with those remarks, I would like to close the panel today. I want to thank. Oh, Spencer, please go ahead.
Uh, I want I want to make sure that everybody listening uh, knows that in entertainment, in Hollywood, in the music industry, the majority of the creations and the things that we enjoy and love are made by black, brown, and yellow people. The majority of the music, the fashion, everything comes from the ancient cultures of black, brown, and yellow people. But the majority of the ownership is white people. And I think that's very, very important issue that needs to be addressed as far as moving forward. And
I agree.
executives at label. I've been to record labels. I've been all over, right? I think it's very wrong for something that I create or somebody else creates, right? From a sacred place, right? Art is sacred from the heart, only to be looked at as just simply an asset and monetary gain by these label executives and by entertainment executives, Hollywood producers, whatever, and could even just say, okay, well, we're the bank, we're gonna loan you this money, but we own your creation. I think that's a big problem because I've noticed a lot of record labels and a lot of corporations they're coming out and saying, oh, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. But if Black lives really matter to these corporations, why can't the artists own their music? Why can't the production companies, why can't the movie companies cast if you're doing a historical movie on an Asian person, why can't you cast an Asian person instead of casting Mark Wahlberg? Why, if you're making, if you're doing, why all the people on the set all white, but this movie is all about a black historical event, or this movie is about an Asian historical event, but everybody on the set is white. So I think that is something that behind the scenes, not a lot of people get to see. They see us as the face. Okay, they see like, for example, Bruce Lee, right? Bruce Lee was doing his thing in the 70s, right? And then he had it's all about working and trying to make a name for yourself and work with the people that support you. But there comes a point where we're gonna have to collaborate with these folks, right? These folks that treat us bad, these folks that oppress us systemically and oppress us through media and betrayal of us. But eventually, we're gonna have to work with these folks moving forward if we want to make any change, right? So Bruce Lee, I know y'all all seen Enter the Dragon. So they were trying to tell him, because he had to partner with, that was the first movie, was he had to partner with a big corporation, Warner Brothers, right? And they try to make him change his script and say, oh, you can't put any philosophical things that you want to say, and you can't put any of that political stuff and all that on that and all that you're trying to put in the movie, and all the social issues that you're trying to sneak in there. They said we want the movie to be all action, and I feel like that happens so much with across all entertainment, where you have these white people at the top trying to tell the creatives what you can and can't do. So Bruce Lee, he boycotted, and I was not that's not the technical term, but he didn't show up to set for 2 weeks until until they let him use his script. And I feel like that shouldn't be a thing, right? If you're the money, if you're the person bringing in all the money for so many people, right? Why is there so little power in decision making with you? You know what I'm saying? And so he finally got his way, but then he was killed, or I mean, I can't say that, he died,
Right.
right? He died 10 days before the movie came out, so he didn't get to see the impact he had on the world. He didn't get to see it, all the kids and all the people across the entire globe saying, "Yo, who's this? This is the first Asian lead, that the Asian superhero per se, in mainstream American media." And that was one of his goals. So I think moving forward, we have to look back at stuff like that
Yep.
and realize that we have to really hold each other accountable, right, and work with each other, right? Because a lot of people, a lot of artists in the industry I'm in, they sign bad deals, right? Then they don't have access to good lawyers. They don't know who to ask to represent them as a lawyer. They don't know who that, and then they end up, the label will say, "Oh, we got lawyers. You could use our lawyers," right? Then suddenly some Jewish man walks in, and he's the cousin of the VP of the label, right? So we gotta realize, okay, this is how they've built it up. So now we have to build our own things, right? Like, we got to build our own things, and it's all about that collaboration, right? How can I, as an artist, work with you guys as lawyers, or you guys as professionals? We're all melanated professionals here, so
Yep.
we're the ones who have to build things that are gonna last for generations to come. So I think it's all about that collaboration.
Yep. Point noted, Spencer. And I certainly can't top a Bruce Lee story. So on that note, he did. I mean, he made waves. Can't top. I cannot top a Bruce Lee story. So on that note, I want to thank wholeheartedly every single one of our panelists who have joined from across the world, and all of the people who've listened in today. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you were able to take away some positive messages today. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate